some of you may know that Ken and I worked together for almost 10 years in the Dean of Students office, and we had a particular orientation to that, which was crisis intervention. Being an old community mental health person, that was something I wanted to bring to the school because all of us go through normal life crises, and we don't call students patients. It's not what we were about. We were really about helping people through whatever they were going through, which might have been interfering with their ability to really learn well, which is what our focus was. So that could be illness, that could be death of someone, and that could be financial woes, a whole lot of stuff. So during that time, practically from the beginning, Ken was dealing with his own life crisis, which Atoll Gawande, wonderful to be distracted by little ones, which Atoll Gawande has called the emperor of all maladies, and in his case, chondrosarcoma. Nevertheless, he was at school as much as this recurring illness allowed him, teaching students, paying particular attention to the transition of first-year students, because that in itself can be a normal life crisis, and taking good care of all the rest of us, including me. Actually, during this whole process, one thing kind of always sort of amazed me about Ken, which was his greeting, which is, you know, how we use the throwaway, how are you? And his greeting was always, how are you? And I thought, why is he asking me how I am when this going through this? But it was a very genuine, it was vintage Ken. So, in closing, because when you work at this school, you learn to be brief when you're speaking. So I think I've come within the 3-minute limit that I believe Nick Cavino had us stay to, because everybody wants an opportunity to talk or to listen to other people. I wanted to share with you a quote that both Ken and I really enjoy, and maybe it's apt for this time of life that he's at, and that people like me are at, being almost 77. So this happens to be from William James, since you are now William James College, and this is what it says. I am done with great things and big plans, great institutions and big success. I am for those tiny, invisible, loving human forces that work from individual to individual, creeping through the crannies of the world like so many rootlets, or like the capillary oozing of water, yet which, if given time, will rend the hardest monuments of human pride. I think that kind of stands for what you do. I think it stands also for what we in the field of psychology or any of the helping professions have the opportunity to do. So with that, I will leave this microphone and we can start.
Thank you, Fran. What a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
Lionel, you have some guidelines for
Yeah,
us?
I don't think I'll need the mic.
I mean, I have to behave, Lionel?
No.
Oh, okay.
You can do anything.
Yeah. There are 3 rules for this meeting. It's okay to cry, it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to leave. So if you find that you really wanted to be here, but it would be better for you to step out, please do that and know that Ken won't take that in a negative light at all. So those are our only rules.
So, can you have a clip on?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Great. So the rest of us can share this mic, and maybe we use it as a talking stick. We had not planned who was going to go first, but I do want to ask Ken if there's anything you wanted to say before we start the conversation.
Sure. Stan graciously asked, what do I want? And I did want a pyramid built in the parking lot. A couple of my old students sacrificed. But it took up too many parking spaces. So I got talking to Jody, and I love teaching, and I'd love to go out teaching in some way. So these guys put it together. I I hope it's not quite like Hillary in the Benghazi committee, but I'm a psychologist, so we'll wing it. So thank you for coming. You've touched my heart.
Does anybody have a first question?
Happy to be there.
You have to sit really close to the mic. Yes.
Right, and then it won't reverb off of his mic.
Well, then people will hear you louder.
They can hear me?
Only if you have it right next to your mouth.
Oh, my God.
We heard that.
Yes.
1, 2, 3. Is this on? No, they're saying it's on.
It's on, but you're not speaking loud.
Go like this.
Go like this? Oh, my.
I remember you when you were young, you know?
It's like, please, let's take the whole thing, and now I've got this mic in my mouth. So, we go back a long time, and I have to say, I didn't know who would be interviewing each other, and we've had a lot of shared rides over the years. And a special relationship. So you want me to speak up?
Yeah, it's even hard for us to hear.
It's hard for me. Some of you know I had throat surgery, so talking is very difficult for me. We're like one eye, one ear.
We got together and formed one psychologist.
All right. Okay. Serious. This has to clean up well, because we're going to use it. I'm going to use it for my courses in Gero, and I know health psychology will use it. We'll edit it out so we look really good.
Face painting.
Yeah. So we talk a lot, especially when we do end-of-life stuff and palliative and hospice care. And I did hospice work for many years, and we know all about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and that. So I guess what I want to ask you is some of the stuff that was cleaned out of that, and that is, what gives you hope, and what's the relief part, and what's the curiosity part as you face this last phase. So it's the hope and relief and curiosity. I call that. This is unscripted, folks. Don't you tell anything.
Well, thinking of psychological theory, and Erickson always captures things well for me. He talks about this part of life being despair versus generativity. And that really sinks in, because I've had family and friends who have died in despair. And look back on their life and say, what was it? I'm pretty lucky. Look at this, such a rich life.
Oh, look at it there.
I mean, I have wonderful family. Next generation's coming. Friends, colleagues, associates, students will become friends. My life is so rich. I don't have lots of regrets or remorse. Maybe I wasn't bad enough in life. All that sort of just makes life so rich. We came out of the world more. So that's how I feel. So I have lots of hope. I feel alive. And people have been wonderful. And denial helps a lot. God, Kubler-Ross says you get over that. I'm not sure I have. This has been going on for 10 years in one way or another. And I don't think you can be a psychologist without knowing that people die, that bad things happen, that people suffer, that people are in pain. People often said, oh, why you? And I said, why not? Why not me? It didn't feel that traumatic to have it happen that way, because all our lives, we see the families really worse than that. So that's helped. Being a psychologist all these years and learning from those people and sharing their pain has made it much easier for me, I think. And again, at this point, I want to live as much. I'm not, I'm kind of getting a sense of dying. Death is totally different. Even when I've had loved ones die, the dying has been one thing, but death has always come as a shock.
Always true.
So, but I'm not gonna be around for that shock, so. So I just got the dying part, and it's surreal. Even as my body sort of tells me, you know, my arm is dead, but it's strange, it's part of me and not part of me. You adjust, you just, you know.
And part of what you're doing tonight.
Oh, well, that's the most wonderful thing, still living. You know,
And very
being,
generous.
and being involved with people. That's just, it gives me energy. You know, people worry would I have energy for tonight. You know, when I feel the pain is when I'm alone. And with people, it sort of fades in the background. And it's, you know, it's wonderful. Did I answer?
Responded and answered within a conversation. The fact of curiosity, because the process.
I mean, about what does life mean and where am I going? That
Well,
yeah.
it's going in the existential side,
Okay.
but the curiosity of watching yourself go through this.
Oh, you know, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in so many hospitals. One of the things I want to come back and lecture in health class about, I see what all these different professions, you know, medical professions, how they train their students. And since I was a psychologist, it always said, oh, could we bring a student in, you know, and experiment with you? I said, sure, I'll teach it. So, see how they teach and how we teach. And especially as psychology getting more, you know, connected to primary medicine, we have a lot to teach them. We have a lot to learn from them. One thing you need to learn from them, I suggest, is, you know, most psychologists have this inferiority complex. They think somebody in the next room is doing this thing better. And that's because we don't see each other's work enough. You know, in medicine, you know, the people are teaching are showing their students what they're doing. Too much, you know, we pontificate in the classroom, talk about our cases, but our students don't see us working enough. So I think, especially with all the technology now, for to bring one thing back to school here, I'd say, let's find a way that students and faculty work more together. So I think that's the wonderful thing about it. The other thing about medicine is, God, if we get involved, we need not to just be co-opted into, you know, the business model of medicine. Most doctors don't know how to listen.
With the listeners.
If there's one thing that we train psychologists is we listen. And even the best doctors don't listen.
Okay, a teaching moment, because this is gonna be you.
Yeah.
What would you encourage us as teachers in health psychology and geropsychology? What, other than what we're already teaching, that you've been teaching, would you encourage our students to ask, inquire, and listen to and listen for working with therapy?
I think just to be open to anything. I mean, don't be afraid to ask any question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're psychologists, and supposedly what we deal with is reality. You know, we talk about sex, we talk about money, we talk about, you know, the most intimate relationships.
Right.
Not why. They ask what it's like to die. You know, and the most intimate questions. And, you know, it's, you know, when you're careful with people, you leave them alone.
And there's an openness that you want to be able to question.
The people I've worked with who have died have had the same kind of thing. I appreciate that kind of conversation.
How have you with people, because I know from how have you with people who have you worked with who have died, how have you integrated them and continued them? How have you honored their death?
I think, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking of my practice, and I've been going through files and shredding files, and I was thinking of the people I worked with who are dead, and the conversations we had. I think I learned so much just listening to them. Most of the time, their concerns were for the living. You know, what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to my spouse, if I left them in a good place. You know, it wasn't so much about them or their pain. It wasn't so much, so to allow them, they taught me that, I think, the generativity part.
And did you not find, I found that I'm sure most of us have found that just using the cases to discuss it, it's honoring the people.
At least, you know, as a psychologist, all your cases sort of live inside you. And people who die always continue to answer.
Of course it is.
Now, some of the ones you terminate sort of fade.
But you know, turn that into a learning moment.
Right.
teaching moment as well. Is there anything I didn't bring up that you would have wanted me to bring up because of our special connections?
You know, we've been going through some of the same things, facing some of the same issues. Do you have anything to say? Wait, given the, political atmosphere, let's be careful with that term.
I don't know. I'm doing okay because as Fran said, you always ask, so how are you doing?
Mhm.
I'm going to hand the microphone to somebody else
Okay.
who's going to have an intimate conversation with you and Diane.
Thanks. So I was trying to quiet my thoughts and just see what words came about you. And the words were brave and teacher, so I put them together. And got brave teacher. It seemed to sum you up. So one thing I'm really curious about, Ken, we all work so hard to avoid engaging with the knowledge that we're going to go through what you're going through in one way or another. What enabled you to move beyond that?
I'm not sure I am.
Well, you're sitting
I'm
here.
kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah, but you've moved beyond the avoidance because you're sitting here inviting us to ask you anything.
Well, I mean, I must say part of it is being a psychologist. Being a psychologist is just not a profession. It's more who you are. And dealing with all those kind of intimate issues and seems like the norm in some ways. It's kind of a little flipped when it's on yourself, but I think that's part of it. I think just having ourselves such wonderful support, such a wonderful family, a spouse who is true north. So it seems natural. It's part of life.
And yet, including it in life is something that I think is rare for us to do. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about what would make it more likely that all of us could include the end of life in life as part of life, not as, the prelude to death.
I don't know if I have an answer to that, except, I feel very alive. As I said, my life is so full. That certainly helps. I know I said something profound to say there, but
I think you've already said something profound, that you feel very alive. I remember when I was first supervising a couple of our students who were placed at elder services, I asked them, so what do you think we old people, pointing at myself, what do you think we do all day? And they got very quiet. And then finally one of them, neither of them is in this room, finally one of them got up the nerve and he said, well, we think you probably sit and look back over your lives and think about death. And I said, I'm going to ask you that question again in a few months.
Only some days I do. That's part of it. But certainly not all of it.
But it's not all of it.
No, not at all.
Because there are naps
Is the
and
point.
frequent
By the way, if you don't know Bob, this question, because you can't have lunch with Bob without talking about the meaning of life, your deepest, darkest impulses, primitive fantasies, Papagenos. So I'm not sure what you're going to talk about.
Can I just maybe scoop, just be in So, what was really in my mind that I wanted to ask you is really about your life as a clinician. And, you know, I've known, you know, Ken and I have talked about our patients and so on. And the other day I was visiting with Ken, and you told all of us the story of the family that wouldn't talk. And so I think what I'd like to ask you is to talk about the moments as a clinician that are most meaningful to you, where you really learned. I mean, we all have those moments that say, I'm never going to forget this, right? What I learned here. And I'm interested in hearing about as many of those as you feel like talking about, or whichever ones you feel like talking about.
Keep them confidential by next month. Well, the first thing about being a clinician, if I could preview it, you know, I feel like I'm just starting to get the hang of it now. 40 years in, I just think I'm getting good at it.
I hope my clinical center 4 students are in the room. So you think they're supposed to already know.
So first, I feel like I should have kept a list of my early clients and patients, and my early students too, and send them all apologies. Because certainly I have learned as much from my students and my colleagues, from my patients and clients, because they come in pain. I mean, nobody comes to psychotherapy to learn more about themselves or become self-actualized. People go to therapy when they're hurting. And it's such a privilege that people will share that with you. So that's the overarching thing. Every case brings that in. That people will share their pain with you. What privilege that is. To struggle with that with people. We were talking about this family the other night. I was just musing about managed care, setting goals and, what are you going to do in the next 3 sessions. I remember this one family I saw for a while. Their teenage son had committed suicide out of the blue. Went out to the West Coast and visited an aunt, and there was a gun in the house, and he shot himself. And for 6 months, the father, mother, and daughter came into my office, and they just moaned, or cried, or were silent. And I remember, part of the defense, sitting with that, not knowing what to do with it except to be there and witness it, thinking, what do I write as my managed care goal? And it was not to run out of the room. So sometimes, it's showing up. It's bearing witness. There's no gold standard for that. There's no 10 treatment session for that. So I love that. There's a quote I always tell students from T.S. Eliot. It says, teach me to care, teach me not to care, teach me to sit still. And I often have just sat still a lot. Speak. So that's the best wisdom I got, is hang in there and sit with people, because most people run from the room. Or, again, as psychologists, when you ask how somebody is, most psychologists, you start to tell them, and most people in the world will start telling, oh, I know what you mean, and tell you about themselves. And psychologists listen. So that's other cases. Oh, you have to have fun. Recently I had this little bipolar little girl who was quite wild, but wanted to drink of water, so I got to drink of water. And all of a sudden, she has a cup in her hand, and I see the gleam in her eye. And I said, not on my head. So she pours out her own head. So, how do you go out to the waiting room and explain to parents, it's dim and dry. So they have to have a sense of humor, too. So, you just have life in the therapy. That's the thing. But therapy is going well when it's alive. Whatever your technique, whatever your orientation, when it's alive in the room, something therapeutic is everywhere. And when it's dead, when there's no sense of connection, that's when you really need to you work hard to figure out how do you find that human connection. And that's, yeah, same with teaching. Oh, if you got a dead classroom, you gotta do something, stand on your head, or, do something stupid. I've done many stupid things.
So, when you feel there's that deadness, when you feel there's that deadness and that lack of connection, are there certain things that you typically, ways to look at that, or things you fall back on to try to get it to live again?
We always have to ask ourselves, what does that tell you about the person you're sitting with? And maybe that's a deadness in that. Maybe it's a deadness in you, or what is it you can't connect to this person? What are you protecting yourself from? And the best one I always find is just to put it on the table and say, I don't know about you, this feels good. And figure this out together. Often creates a relationship that begins to solve that problem. And, acknowledge it. Too often what people do is they keep that up, and soon the patient terminates and we go, relief, because they think there's too much resistance there or something like that. And it's not. We didn't find a way to connect. Did you ever, like Buber said, all your life is meaning,
Did you have it, you probably did, but if you want to talk about it, somebody you were treating who you just didn't want to treat anymore. I mean, you really did want to just get out of that room and not come back and help you. What about that situation?
I had one lady I really liked, actually, and worked a long time with her. A terrible trauma history. We diagnosed her borderline and all sorts of access to kinds of things. But she had a chronic, horrible PTSD as a child. And she was always suicidal, suicidal all the time. And by any standard, you'd hospitalize her every day. She'd call, if she went down the list, you should have the police there. But it would be regressive for her because she wouldn't go to work, she'd lose more things. So, but, it got to this point that she'd call on the phone and test the limits. And if I responded, well, yesterday you talked to me for 5 minutes. Now, it kept telling I had to set limits, and she'd be furious with me about them. Finally, I did something. She was upset, and she fired me. She sent a letter to all my associates, 2 pages, listing how unethical, how horrible person I was, and she was firing me. So I consulted with my associates, and it was one of those cases that 90% of my mind was on that. I'm taking up too much space. We could say at her point, probably I'm not helping her, and she probably needed to be fired. But anyway, so she fired me. So finally, I accepted, and she was infuriated that I accepted her firing because she said you'd always hang in there with me. So that was a great relief to give that one up. I think we did some good work together, maybe as much as we could. So, but that's one that comes to mind. It's funny when you're a psychologist. Some people out in the community love and hate you. And a lot of times it has not a lot to do with who you are as a person. So people rave about you, and you're not that good. And people hate you, and you're not that bad. It comes with the territory of being a psychologist. I see all these nodding heads.
Well, I'm going to reluctantly give up the microphone, but I want to say just one thing about this subject of what makes a psychotherapist. People want to know what is the most important thing in being a therapist. And in my mind, it's character. It's more important than intelligence. It's more important than anything. Is character. And when you talk about what you learn, which is you need to be there for the patient. You need to be there for the patient. That's who you are. I'm sure to me, but I'm sure to everybody, that a person who always is there.
Well, Ken, I would like to go back to what you said about learning that just being quiet with someone was really critical around time and issues. Because before becoming a psychologist, I was a psychiatric nursing instructor, And I had to work with a lot of nursing students who would be one of the first people to go into rooms where people were obviously dying. And the most common thing that they would say to me was, I really am avoiding that room. I don't want to go in because I don't have anything brilliant to say about it. And so helping people to see that just sitting with and being with is really critical, I think, is a very important teaching. I remember one young student nurse who just sat down with a patient, and 3 hours later she came out of the room and he recited his entire life history to her, and everyone else was avoiding him. So being present and not feeling nervously like one has to have the right thing to say, I think is really critical. And so what you said, I just wanted to respond because I think it's pretty critical.
Yeah, I discovered half of life is just showing up. Do that and something happens.
What about your teaching psychologists about this? What would you want psychologists to know beyond what you have just said?
Well, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask about what's it like, feel like you're dying, what's the pain like. You know, one of the things I guess I bring back to school and teach better is we really don't teach enough biology, physiology, is dealing with, I just know that since I've been in pain and have some physical stuff, I ask when my intakes much more about people's physical well-being, history of illnesses, pain levels, than I ever did before, because it's such an important part. So it's one thing we could teach better here and integrate, especially if we're going to move into more of an integration with medical health care. I think we need to buff up our knowledge of it in general. Psychologists, we tend to be pretty naive about that and not even think about asking about those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So that you have some knowledge that you can ask. To ask what it's like. Some of what's most difficult is there's all these humiliations that come to us. They're not so much the first humiliations, then you say, oh, what the hell. I'm talking about bathrooms. I went to the bathrooms before I came, and there was this man in there, and actually I got a nice conversation afterwards with him after the intro. He's a vet and returned to school here. But I said to the bathroom, I said, I know this is a very strange question for a man to ask a man in the bathroom, but would you help me zip up my zipper? And when you're young, you want people to help you pull down your zipper. No. So, those kinds of things, that's just how you move it.
What was his response?
He was sweet, he's so sure. He told me about he had a friend with a disease, that he lost the use of his limbs, and we had this whole conversation. He said, oh, there's an event for you tonight, so we had a home. Said, I know Sarah was talking about you, and things like that, so I met a nice, I said, this was a nice bathroom conversation. So life happens everywhere, if you show up.
But you had to be comfortable yourself in presenting.
Well, it takes a while to do that. I mean, those first kind of things are just shaming, embarrassing. Is your functions, you need other people to help you. Mm-hmm. The terror that I have, if people haven't asked that, is I'm lost my hand.
Right.
To lose my other hand, it's tingling now.
Yeah.
That scares the hell out of me. To give up that kind of control and freedom.
Yes.
That does. So the way I'm going to die, I think that is pretty terrifying. But the way I'm dying is also privileged. I feel like I'm Tom Sawyer at his funeral, I get to say nice things that people say bad things out here, So I can get this grand tour of seeing all these people I'm so in love with. So you got to take the good with the bad.
How are you finding the actual medical practice that you're involved with in terms terms of responding to you psychologically?
In general, the medical practice stinks at responding psychologically anyway. You know, it's become so specialized that even within, if you're talking to a neurosurgeon, all of a sudden you might have some questions about your general health or symptoms. As soon as it's not in their range, all of a sudden you see their eyes sort of glaze over. Even the oncologists, if you go to Dana-Farber, there's wonderful people from the parking lot attending all the way up. They're so warm and friendly. Some of the oncologists are more kind of scientist Asperger types. And the recent one has never asked me once how I feel physically, let alone emotionally. He sort of starts in the middle of the sentence and what we can do and not do. And so, you know, but I'm sure he's a great scientist. You know, again, if it's your surgeon, you don't need them to hold your hand. You just want to have the skills in the operating room. Although my neurosurgeon, actually of all the people, well, we developed a relationship because I had kind of like one of those cards at a donut shop where the 10th operation would be free. So we had a long relationship, and he was the one who asked to tell me that there was no more they could do for me. And he started crying, which was a gift.
Yes, that's different than what your other experiences have been.
But often what happens is then you're done with that person, and you don't get to say goodbye to them, you know? You know, actually I found, you know, one of the things being sick and being in Boston, it's the best place to be. I mean, I would be dead long before now. I've had surgeries that nobody else has had. I've had levels of radiation that nobody else has had between Mass General and Brigham's and you know, the Farber. You know, so that's been magnificent with the level of care. And I have a rare kind of thing, so I'm interesting. So you get good care when you're interested. You get sick, get something interesting. Two-sided coin. So,
yes, I remember you saying it was a very unusual form of cancer, and some of the treatments were the first time they'd ever done this, right?
yeah, I had 2 vertebrae totally removed.
Right, a little plastic thing put in its place, and had to deal with how to maneuver with that. And lots of other kinds of surgeries. It seemed like there were one after another.
Up to
10 surgeries with a space of about 5 years after the first, and then the rest of them were all within this last 4 or 5 years, which is also in itself a lot of stuff to get over, a lot of anesthetic, a lot of recovery each time, which I was always amazed with how you sprang back.
I have a question. I don't have a microphone, but I have a question. It doesn't seem to matter. So, it does help, which is good. Repeat the question. Apportioning your own resources of energy, the boundaries that you have to set, I know that this is hard. How do you do that? How have you done that? How have you done that to use yourself?
Well, I've been busier than ever. Thank God Mary's my social secretary now. You know, as I said, I'm so rich, and the people wanting to come by and stop by, do things, and most time it's anytime. But we find, you know, after several days of that, we sort of hunker down, Mary and I, and don't answer the phone, and we spend some time with each other, which we need. So it's kind of a mixture.
You were able to say that.
Yeah, and people are very respectful of that. Of the IAS ask, is this a good time? And I'm at the point that I can say, I'd love to see you. Today's not the day, let's schedule something later.
Is that based on how you feel, your energy, or?
Based on how I feel and energy, yeah. I mean, sometimes, as I said, I wasn't sure I had the energy. But then when people came, that energized me. But then I usually found after this weekend, I had family up, we had some friends over, you know, we had a full weekend. So, you know, Monday was one of those down days. It was good just to shut the doors and, you know, sleep late and have a couple glasses of wine and relax.
So Ken, people have been talking about lots of different relationships with with clients, with students, with doctors, and we've been circling around talking about family. Well, you and I are both people who love family therapy and family, and I'm going to ask you some questions about that.
Sure.
So, you talked a little earlier about fears, and one of the things that I've seen both clinically and in looking at death in my own family, that families have really different ways of handling how much they acknowledge to each other the impending losses, and how much people are willing to say, I'm afraid of dying, I'm afraid of leaving you behind, I'm afraid of how you'll be after I'm gone, or I'm afraid of losing you, I don't know how I'll be after you go, or for that matter, I'm going to miss you desperately and I want you to know I'll be all right, whatever it is. So many families can't have those conversations, and I know that you have had a lot of those conversations.
I got quite a family.
Sorry?
I got quite a family.
You have a great family, which is, part of your charm. And I wonder, given the reality that every family does it a little bit differently and there's no one prescription, what your thoughts are about what you would want people who are helping the family members of people who are dying with. What would they be helped by knowing?
Well, with families, you have to enter a family and be allowed in. And you have to be respectful of how families operate, protect themselves, function, defend themselves. So I don't think there's any prescription, because it's been great for me and my family to be very open about things. But you should go barging into every family and say, well, let's talk about this and that. I think you have to slowly form a relationship, just as in any therapy, and see what you're allowed to. You can encourage it, but I wouldn't think of here's a 10 session, we'll put you through, and at the end your family will, have come to terms with death. I don't think it works that way. I think, you have to use those clinical skills, and if there's any difficult issue that needs to be talked about, how do you get at it? How do you do that in a respectful way that appreciates all those kinds of things we as clinicians are constantly thinking about? Can family handle it? How much can the family handle? Who's more vulnerable? How do you deal with that? So I think it's complex. And I think, I've been saying goodbye to some of my old clients slowly over the years. I've sort of let them go and haven't taken on new ones, especially after the past 4 years. But I got my old group that probably will never leave me, and so I've been saying goodbye to them. And it's been interesting to do that, because in some ways, I'm talking about me. I'm very conscious, and in some ways I'm more open in sharing things, but I'm very conscious for each one that it's still therapy, and it's still their needs that come first. And it's been lovely, because I've been more human in some ways, and that allows them to break some of those stereotypes of patient therapist and be just more human back. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm always conscious that it's about them, and I go different levels with different people. And so I think the same thing doing family work, you always have to have that kind of sense. It's not about you. It's about the other in therapy.
So I'm aware of time in this room, and I do want other people to have a chance to ask questions, but I do have one more I would like to ask. You and I talked a week and a half or so ago, and you said, and I said, is there anything off limits? And you said one thing,
Okay.
and I joined you in that. It was like, I don't want to hear any crap about his brave battle against cancer.
So, illness and death, we're all going to get sick or die. It doesn't make us any more special, privileged, wonderful, braver. You tend to be who you are, and so that kind of.
So I wanted to give you a chance to say that out loud, because
I only say profound things now.
I understand.
Pressure. I can't chit chat anymore. I have to just gravitas all the time, you know?
Well, leave them laughing. So, does anybody have any last questions for this round? This is,
I think just one last question, because, you know, our relationship began here at the old MSVP. And so, you know, I think that, you know, your life here is, I mean, we need to touch the beginning of the surface of your life here as a teacher here at MSVP. But, you know, if anything comes to mind that, you know, I love funny moments and things like that, you know, just, you know, something that really, you know, it comes to you, that sort of captures, you know, all those decades here in SVP in so many different capacities that, if nothing comes to mind, but that sort of interested me. Right?
I mean, at all
Yes,
four schools?
all four places, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, so in the first school I was used to the crucifixes. All my Jewish colleagues said, what's that on the wall?
Sacred Heart.
Yes, Sacred Heart. Seemed normal to me. But maybe this pulls it all together. You know, I was the first graduate to become a full-time faculty member here. And I had gotten my first semester's reviews, and they were pretty good. And the old president, Bruce Weiss, you had to know him. I knew him in his prime when he was great. You know, we were when I was a student here, we were making up the school, students and faculty in the hallway as it went along. What was the setting? What was it going to be? Came back my fourth year, found out in September that they decided we would do a dissertation. So I had to do a dissertation.
Building a plane in flight.
Yes. So he was wonderful. But, you know, sometimes we had different political ends when I was a student. So anyhow, I got these reviews, they were pretty good, and we're in the kitchen, he was making some coffee, and he looked over at me and said, Ken, I saw the reviews, they were pretty good. He said, gee, I never would have thought of that from when you were a student. So students, don't let us define you.
well, what we'd like to do at this point is open it up. We have, there's a microphone, it's over there. So why don't people who want to speak line up at that microphone? And please feel free. This is your time. This is our communal conversation with our beloved Ken.
There might be a few people I might, you know, if Sonia gets up the mic, I'm not.
Well,
I'm the first one.
everybody else is okay though.
Wow, what a privilege.
And can everybody say your name, because Ken knows everybody, but everybody doesn't know everybody?
So I'm Mari Carmen Benazar, faculty here, have the privilege of knowing 3 or 4 years, Ken. First, thank you so much. This has been very a privilege to be here. You have talked a lot about these teaching moments and that, but one thing that you have done, in spite of that we haven't been so close, I've had the opportunity, I have been very personally touched. I think you're very personable, and you make feel people special. I have certainly felt that. So along those lines, how is it for you? You have said that, so I'm plagiarism. Personally, with your family, the process. How is this for you? With you, with your family, with.
It's sad. I'm gonna cry now. The saddest thing is not to be there. Take care of him. It's wonderful now, but to know I'm not gonna be there. See my granddaughter grow up, the other grandkids. You know, Mary and I have been together 44 years, 45. I think she's gonna miss me.
My best friend,
My 2 kids, you know, they're wonderful, significant others. Sad. Sad is sad. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know, I have to change the subject. My favorite line in all this, you know, I've been, you know, interested in all, I have often been accused of having a sick sense of humor. My family shares that too as well. But you know, the best quote I've heard of all this is Oscar Wilde. You know, I know we all have to die, but they thought they'd make an exception for me. They don't get it.
I know Marty can't be the only person who wants to ask a question or say something. Feel free for people to stand up.
Someone to finish your dissertation?
Teacher, good job.
See the smile on her face?
So, my name's Jackie Kinsman, and I was once, I worked at MSPP a long time ago when it was over in the old building, and then I became a student in the school psychology program and went on to the school psychology doctoral program. And Ken, you were one of the first people that I met when I started working at MSPP. So I feel very blessed to be able to be here. My question is, when the doctor told you that there was nothing left that they could do, what were the first thoughts that went through your head? How were you feeling? I can't imagine.
Oh, shit. That was a problem. You know, I thought, you know, I've been having, I have the cancer that doesn't respond to chemotherapy, so I've had all the radiation anybody can take. So it's surgeries and everything. And so when he said there's nothing else to do, I thought I had maybe another surgery in me. So I was thinking in a year or 2 down the line. So, you know, I've been dealing with it for 10 years, so it wasn't a total shock, but it was shock enough. It was painful. Mary was there with me. And surgeons crying before we cried. And so we cried some, and it's hard to get your head around. Even all this, it's still surreal. You know, you're talking about it, and but it's there and not there all the time. So it's a mixture of that. You know, what's good is having had good care, and you know, top Boston doctors, and I know that I've had all the options. So I haven't had the second guessing, should I go get another opinion, you know, because I've had that all the way through. So in some ways that was a comfort, that, you know, it wasn't like this bargaining, oh, maybe I could find something else. So it was it was clear and final, which made it some way easier to take. It's funny, the first time, 10 years ago when I first got the diagnosis, I was very direct with the surgeon. I said, is this going to kill me? You know, I like to know things. And actually what he said was not in the short term. It was a year later I said to Mary, I heard there's no. A year later I said to Mary, he said not in the short term, right? So it took me a year to sort of adjust to that. So I've been sort of adjusting it for 10 years. So I guess I'm babbling on.
No.
So I babbled in my mind is what I did. And Mary and I held on to each other. So.
I think I'm remembering many of our conversations and our agreement and discussion that a lot of life during these earlier years are lived between hysteria and denial, right? And that the key is to put off the hysteria until right before the MRIs and the CTs and those kind of tests that you know they're not calibrating the equipment, they actually might be finding something. But between that, there's that surreal thing of knowing and yet having to go to the deli counter and the dry cleaners and take care of the business of living even while in the back of your mind. Am I summing up a lot of our
Yes.
conversations?
Well, you know, when you go in for an MRI, and you come out and the people are much nicer to you afterwards, it's not a good sign.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ellen Siegel. I was
Ellen.
in Ken's class in 1995. I don't know if that makes me one of your earlier students, but when you said you wanted to apologize to your earlier students, the first thing that came into my mind was there's absolutely no apology necessary. And I'm pretty sure I speak for all of us.
Absolutely.
What I wanted to say, and this is more a comment, I guess, than a question, there are so many different styles that families have, and I am so moved and so appreciative of the openness that you are showing to your family and to your extended family of students and faculty colleagues and everybody here of exploring what's going on. Because I have seen families that operate in a completely different way. I had an experience with a patient recently who told me that a relative had had a stillbirth and nobody in the family will talk about it. And it just seemed like so wrong. So thank you.
Hi.
Hi, I don't know you.
I know, that's how it's gonna start. You're ruining it. So I'm Doug Frew. I'm a fourth year here.
No, go for that.
Oh, there you go. I'm Doug Frew, fourth
Nice
year
to meet
here.
you.
Nice to meet you. It's the first time I've gotten, I've talked to other people. Sorry about that. I've talked to other people. They said you have a way of encompassing the whole room. They were right. Bringing everybody in like you're having a personal conversation is definitely true. So the pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Something struck me about what you said was that since getting the diagnosis, you've been more conscious and aware of bringing up physical health, bringing up death, bringing up dying with your clients. So as a student, we hear a new topic every week. And every week it's
How do you
like,
bring all these
that's an
topics
amazing
up?
thing. We need to talk about that. How do we bring it in? How do you figure out which one, in your experience, is, or how do you encompass all that into your conversations with your clients?
Well, you don't.
Great answer, thank you.
You know, it's a relationship, and you take people for where they're at and listen to what they bring to you. I think that's what you follow. You know, I always tell my students, follow the affect. If you're lost, where's the affect? And if there's no affect, what's that about? Remember Noreen Johnson, who was president of the American Psychological Association of Privilege, when I was a student. I took a seminar with her, and she taught me a simple thing, ABC. So that as a human being, there's affect, there's cognition, and there's behavior. And she said, whether it's yourself or your clients, if you know, say, for example, what you're thinking and what you're doing, you should be asking yourself, well, how do I feel? If you're feeling and doing something, you should say, well, what are you thinking? And so often, if you listen to your clients and patients and yourself, by the way, I always tell students, if any of this theory does not make sense to you and help you understand yourself better as a human being, help you be I'm a better human being for being a psychologist, even reading psychological theory, because it challenges you. But so that ABC always came into mind. So think about that when you're with your new clients as they present. For example, I have one woman I've seen for years, lovely woman, no one guessed what the DSM diagnosis would be. But she constantly, every man she met, she fell in love with. And, she'd be having to move in and then there'd be a mess. And so, she could talk about her feelings on and on. She constantly behaved in impulsive kinds of ways. So the major focus of our therapy was, what are you thinking? And we actually got down to a list, one of those lists of, if you go out with a guy, these are the 12 things, and you have to go from 1 year before you invite him into your house. Somebody like that, other people, it's all about what they think and what they do. And that's the people you want to somehow find a way to ask, does that feel? So she told me that years ago. In addition to just sitting still, that's another short thing that has always helped me get through in therapy, to think that way. And think that way about myself. You know, what's missing. You know, because, again, as I think about life, and I've been thinking about life a lot, you know, that's what therapy should be. You know, that often people come to us because they've learned, they've been taught to feel guilty or ashamed about just being human, about being sad, or about being mad, about being assertive, about being intimate. And how do we help them free up that life, that they can feel those kinds of feelings about themselves, about others? Other people come in because they've been so traumatized by others, and how do we somehow help them once again feel that they can have life and trust in others? So it really is about life. And if neurotic symptoms, you know, more severe symptoms, keep us from living fully. And that's good therapy, I think, brings people to that life. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. New friends, it's great.
So I'm Bruce Ecker, I'm on the faculty here, and I appreciate your privilege of today, what you're sharing with us, and over the years, so much you've shared. Can't hear, I'm sorry. So Ken, I appreciate the privilege of all you've shared with us today and all you've shared with us over the years. Just enjoying knowing you has been a privilege. My question is this. You mentioned about one of your arms isn't working. And then you talked about you really feared the other one not working. And it made me wonder this, and this might sound, well, we'll see. How much of you is your body? How much of you is your soul? How much of your spirit, your mind? Essentially, who are you? So I wonder if you have thoughts about that.
Well, I think my thoughts are going to evolve on that. You know, I was, some parts of your body are more connected to who you are. You know, after one of my surgeries, my legs were paralyzed for a while, and I couldn't walk. I learned to walk again. It was more difficult to lose my right arm than to lose my legs, for me, because that's what I write with, what I, you know, do most things with.
Yeah.
How I hold a book, you know, all those things. But I've sort of adapted because I got a left arm. I don't know, and so far I can sort of, I mean, right now I got this thing hanging on me that sometimes I wake up at night and I'm not sure where it is. It's a strange experience. It's kind of this dead fish hanging off my, that sometimes I'm aware of, sometimes I'm not. If it progresses, I don't know. If I lose my other arm, eventually I'm going to be paralyzed from the neck down before I die. And so I don't know how losing all that, how much being a talking head, how different that will feel. And I imagine it will. At a certain point, you are your body. And part of that is being able to do things with your body. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's like, can do less things with my body, then it'll mean more as a total person as well. So,
Thank you.
I think. Yeah, well, I hope I still do. Huh? My joke is I'm going to be Stephen Hopkins without the genius.
I'm not so sure about that.
I said everything you said was profound.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe the Stephen Hopkins without the
I can. I'm Win Schwartz.
Uh-oh, don't know what Wynn's going to say. Never know what Wynn's going to say. He's analyst, you know?
Well, I want to know what, I mean, I'm making an assumption that this all sharpens priorities. And I'm curious, really curious about what you still want to do. Anything new? I mean, what do you want to accomplish How do you want to be?
It's a good question. I don't have a bucket list. I guess that says I've done well for myself in life. You know, this has been wonderful, having my family around. As I said, friends, colleagues. It just enriches so much. I just want more of that. You know, I'd like to make it back to Rome and Tuscany and Provence again, but, you know, it's not the major thing. You know, to do this with people I love. But, you know, sometimes you can't live that existentially. I've seen more crappy grade B movies on HBO. I'm here to admit, I'd be embarrassed to tell you which ones they were.
It might be useful to know which ones nonetheless were meaningful.
I'll make a list of them. But I have no big agenda. You know, it's funny, I grew up very Catholic when I was young. I'm not very Catholic now. But I remember there's the story of St. John the Baptist. And I used in the story was, I remember, it was an inspirational thing when I was young. You know, it's like, if you learn that the world is in today, in the world, what would you do? And some of his friends said, oh, I'd go to confession, big thing for Catholics. The other said, I'd go out and I'd do all these things I never got to do. And he always said, I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. I feel privileged, that's how I feel.
Thank you very much.
You know, it's getting weird when I start talking about my Catholic dude.
Are there more questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a fourth-year student here. Ken, I had the privilege of meeting with you when I first started here and launched my career. So one thing that I'm struck by is the amount of love that is in this room, and various types of love. There's love of friendship and of family. So something I'm wondering is, over your years and as you've reached this point in life, is there anything that you've learned about love that has surprised you?
Wow, very good question. Great question has always been silence. Surprised. No. You know, love is hard work. And, you know, it's hard for people to love me sometimes, what I'm going through. But they show up and do it. I've had patients who I thought couldn't get outside of themselves, show love to me. So it's there. You know, it's not this survey kind of love, but this kind of love that connects in a deep way, a caring way. You know, it's a simple love that, not just that I know, but that everybody deserves. It should be a privilege to come with it. If I read a psychologist, no, that doesn't happen. And so when you have it, it's just so precious and special. And give it away. Give it away.
Thank you.
I have one thing I'd like to say. You know, this is November. I always hated November. You know, it's a 2 seasons. You know, New England, there's 2 seasons. 1 month you hate, November and February, right? You know, there's no beauty. The leaves are gone and all that. Well, some of my students remember this because every November, it seemed, when I taught psychopathology, we talked about depression. It's a perfect time to talk about depression. I look outside, the sky, and everything. And one of the things I used to distinguish is, the clinical syndrome of depression, with all the, cognitive, affective, behavioral changes, the vegetative signs that co-vary together that make up a clinical syndrome, and distinguish that from sadness. That sadness that is part of life. And I used to blithely say at that time, some of the existential philosophers tell us that we can't really live till we come to terms with death and the sadness and loss that brings. I do it less blithely now, but I would bring a poem in. So I'd like to read you that poem. It's called My November Guest. I got the first. My sorrow when she's here with me thinks these dark days of autumn rain as beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lanes. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is clean now with silver mist. The desolate, the deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauty she so truly sees. She thinks I have no eye for these and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I longed to know the love of bare November days before the coming of the snow. But it would be vain to tell her so, and they are better for her praise. Thank you.
Hello, Lou.
I know, Lou. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I believe I was in your class in 1991.
So yeah, you're one of the ones I have to
We'll talk. It was an amazing class. I remember people talking about what an amazing clinician you were, how that shone through your teaching, through and through. The other thing that's shining through for me tonight is was saying that people die the way they live, and how clearly you live with such generosity and grace, and that's clear in this process as well, and I'm tremendously grateful for that. And I can't imagine another gathering such as this in which there would be so much laughter. That's really, really quite wonderful. So my question for you is given that you live so much with the glass half full, how do you do that? And in the inevitable down moments, how do you get back to that at this time?
You go to sleep and watch a bad movie? There's sometimes you just get to, as I said, I keep repeating, my life is so full, and look, that before I know it, somebody's there, and that makes all the difference. It really has, and like Mary and the kids, and Sandy and Lauren and little Nola, they're with me all the time now, and just to see a 19-month-old full of life. It's interesting. I've been comparing, being a psychologist and grandfather now, I have more time to watch, more noticing the neurocognitive development, and she's sort of, I've been going down and she's been going up. She's not past me in many things. so that's wonderful, I guess. Again, life. What's that, from Wilder's play, Our Town, when the woman whose wife comes back and she gets to see a day of her life. So I said, you don't know how wonderful it is. So I still feel that.
I just want to comment, I know we're going to need to stop in a minute. I'm very aware, Ken, that one of the ways that no one is going to know you is through the video that's being taken tonight.
I know
So maybe each of us wants to take 30 seconds to say something, and then let everybody individual mingle with Ken.
No other. What makes you so special?
But I'm not gonna talk to you, but I'm not gonna go on with it. You know, because there are people and there are people. There are people and there are people, and there are thousands of them. There's only one of you. And I could go on, but I'll say one thing today. If anybody wants to know what humility really means in a human being, true humility, you have to live that. That's right. And many other things.
Yeah, so, do you wanna say something? No. So, if I could just have the mic for 1 minute, so, Stan is coming with something, but let me just say, how meaningful this is for everybody here. Ken, I know for us up in.
A little bit for me.
A little bit. I was hoping a lot, but I'll settle for a little. This is such a beautiful gift to us, you know, giving us your actually very profound thoughts. And despite your proclamations to the contrary, very profound thoughts, and the generosity of spirit that goes with that is just so meaningful. And I'm so grateful that you let us do this with you. And Stan had a great idea. So, it was a great idea.
I'm gonna go off mic for So I know I speak for everyone when we say thank you with tremendous gratitude for this remarkably authentic opportunity to be with you. And we thank you for the gift you've given us tonight, but for the gift you've given us for 10, 20, 30, you tell me when I should stop.
The real truth is, all that dissertation, I've never.
Well, actually, I wanted to talk to you about the methods chapter. There's tremendous love and appreciation in the room, and we were trying to think about what would be a way to show, in small measure, our love and appreciation, and came up with the following idea. Scores of people in this room and people from afar have all written a story or a memory or an appreciation, and we hope that this will be a meaningful gift to you and to your family. And as I'm about to present it to you, I just checked with you about whether you had any more juice, because
I got lots of juice.
So
I'm hanging around.
So if folks do want to come and chat with you and greet you, you're game.
And can I just add one thing really quickly, because for people who didn't get a chance to contribute to this book, Denise and Maurice, who just did so much work on putting this all together, have put some more pages over in that end of the room, and people can write something if they haven't already. And Denise has said that she will put them in the book as addenda. So please feel free to do that.
My next contract is based on these comments.